I want to start today by putting you in a situation that is, well, it's frankly terrifying,
Okay.
but it's a situation that I think really forces you to confront how your brain actually makes decisions. Because we all like to think we're these rational, data-driven people.
Oh, absolutely. That's the story we tell ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
I weigh the pros and cons.
Right. I read the news, I look at the specs, I make the smart choice.
But the reality is,
Mhm.
it's often so much messier. We're pattern matching machines. And sometimes, those patterns are just dead wrong.
Exactly. So here's the scenario, and I really want everyone listening to actually visualize this. Don't just sort of passively hear it.
Put yourself in the room.
Yes, you're in a hospital. This isn't a routine checkup. This is a crisis. You need surgery, a specific, difficult, maybe even a life or death procedure. And the hospital administrator comes in and tells you that you have a choice between two surgeons.
And this is the surgeon dilemma, right? This is a classic thought experiment from the source material we're covering today.
It is, yeah. So you have these two options. Let's just call them Surgeon A and Surgeon B to keep it simple. Now, here is the absolutely critical piece of information.
The control variable.
The control variable. Both of them are department heads. Both have been at this top-tier hospital for the exact same amount of time. Their rank, their official status on paper is identical.
Okay.
Insurance covers both equally. The only difference is the presentation, the aesthetics.
All right, so paint the picture for us. Who is Surgeon A?
Surgeon A is the guy you see on the hospital brochure. He is straight out of central casting for a medical drama.
The movie doctor.
The movie doctor, 100%. He's
Yep.
tall, he's thin, has that, runner's bill. He wears these silver-rimmed glasses that look expensive but somehow understated.
Right.
His hands are long, delicate, elegant. Like, you imagine he plays the cello in his spare time.
Of course he does.
Of course. And his hair is silver, perfectly parted. You walk into his office, and it's just immaculate. The lighting is perfect. The walls are lined with diplomas. Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins, all the big ones. Awards, citations, framed photos of him shaking hands with, dignitaries.
He signals competence in every single possible way you can imagine.
In every way. And he speaks in this calm, reassuring, I am the expert baritone. He looks you in the eye. You just feel safe.
Okay, so that's our paragon of medical virtue. Now tell us about Surgeon B.
Surgeon B is, he's a mess. He's the butcher.
The butcher.
That's the name for him. He's overweight. Maybe he's sweating a little bit, under the hospital lights. He has these large, coarse hands, real sausage fingers.
Not cello playing hands.
Definitely not. His white coat is a little stained. Maybe there's a mustard spot on the lapel. It's untucked at the back. He's got this heavy, thick accent. Let's say a rough New York or New Jersey dialect. Uses uncouth language.
So not the reassuring baritone.
Not at all. And when he smiles, maybe you see a gold tooth winking at you from the back. And you look at his wall.
Unkempt.
Nothing. Maybe a lonely diploma from some state college you've never even heard of. He honestly looks like he should be working the grill at a diner or maybe bouncing at a nightclub, not holding a scalpel.
So the question is simple, but the stakes are, they're infinite.
Right.
Who do you trust to cut you open? Who do you pick?
My gut. My lizard brain.
Yeah.
It is screaming Surgeon A. Every movie I've ever seen, every piece of cultural programming, every instinct about what professionalism looks like tells me Surgeon A is the safe bet.
He's the default choice.
He's the default. Surgeon B looks like a walking malpractice suit. A liability.
And that instinct, that powerful gravitational pull toward the polished image, is exactly what the author of our source material calls the insanity of the filter.
The insanity of the filter.
Because the answer, the mathematically correct answer, the one derived from probability theory, is that you should choose the butcher. You should choose Surgeon B every single time. And you shouldn't even hesitate.
Okay, you have to walk me through this. You have to unpack this for me, because on the surface, choosing the guy who looks like a butcher to perform surgery feels like I'm literally gambling with my life based on a clever paradox.
I get it. It feels wrong.
Yeah.
But it comes down to conditional probability and this idea of a filter. Think about the barriers to entry in a place like a top-tier hospital. It's not easy to get there, and it's not easy to stay.
Right, it's incredibly competitive.
Incredibly. Now, both men, remember, are at the same rank. They're both department heads.
Yeah.
Let's look at Surgeon A. He looks the part. His appearance, his polish, his Harvard demeanor, those are tailwinds.
They help him.
Massively. In any corporate or medical hierarchy, looking the part is a huge advantage. People want to promote him. He fits the narrative of what a leader should look like. His path is smoothed by his presentation.
I see where you're going. So he might be there because he is a genuinely brilliant surgeon.
Whoa.
Or he might be there because he is a brilliant actor who plays the role of a surgeon so perfectly that he just gets pushed up the ladder.
Exactly. The signal is noisy. It's confounded. You can't tell if his success is from skill or from the suit. But now, look at Surgeon B. He has a massive headwind.
Everything is working against him.
Everything. He looks like a butcher. He sounds uneducated. He doesn't have the social graces. He doesn't fit the mold in any way. So for him to have reached the exact same level of the hierarchy as Surgeon A, despite all those negatives, despite the constant bias against him,
He had to possess a level of competence that was just undeniable.
absolutely undeniable, he had to overcompensate for the total lack of image with sheer spectacular results.
There's no other explanation for his success.
None. Think about it. If Surgeon B were incompetent and looked like a butcher, he would have been fired years ago. He wouldn't have survived his first performance review. The fact that he is still there at the top of the department means his results, his patient survival rate, his surgical outcomes must be so unbelievably good that the hospital administration is forced to ignore the fact that he doesn't look the part.
He has skin in the game.
He has survived the filter of reality. Reality is the ultimate judge, and it has judged him to be excellent. Surgeon A has only been judged by his peers and his resume. Surgeon B has been judged by life and death.
That is such a powerful reversal. It's completely counterintuitive. We usually think of polish as a sign of quality, of competence. But you're saying in a truly competitive environment, that polish can actually be a mask. It can hide mediocrity.
It can, whereas the person who survives and thrives without the polish, that's the person who is the real deal.
That is the core theme of this deep dive today. We're going to be exploring this disconnect between image and competence. We're going to look at why our source material argues you should never hire a well-dressed traitor,
A fun one.
why business plans are essentially a well-written fiction for suckers, and why the most scientific-looking things are often the least scientific.
And the source material for all this is, as you said, intense. It's not just a collection of business tips. It's deeply philosophical. It's all built on this bedrock idea that reality is the only judge that matters in the long run.
Right. And this brings us to that central concept, the title of today's deep dive, the green lumber fallacy.
The green lumber fallacy.
It sounds like such a boring kind of construction term, but it's actually a mind-blowing story about the difference between knowledge and making money.
It really is. It's the story of a trader named Joe Siegel. And back in his day, Joe was one of the most successful traders in the world, a legend. He traded green lumber, which is just a commodity. It's freshly cut wood, still wet, used for construction.
Okay, so he's the expert. He's the guy you go to if you want to know about wood. He must know everything about forestry and supply chains.
Well, that's what you'd think, and that's exactly what the author of our source material thought. The author who is, we should say, a bit of an intellectual snob, and he'd admit that.
He's very upfront about it.
Very. So he was fascinated by this guy, Siegel, because the author, our narrator, knew everything about lumber. He read all the industry reports. He knew the biology of the different trees, the geography of the forests, the chemical composition of the pulp. He knew the whole narrative of the wood inside and out.
So he was the academic expert, the guy with the book knowledge.
He was Surgeon A, in a way. And one day, he's talking to Joe Siegel, and Joe makes a comment that just floors him. Joe casually mentions that he thinks green lumber is lumber that has been painted green.
Wait, just pause on that for a second. The guy who is making millions of dollars trading this stuff thought it was literally wood that someone had painted green.
He had no idea it meant freshly cut. He didn't know the most basic dictionary definition of the product who's dedicating his entire professional life to trading.
How is that even possible? That feels like a glitch in the matrix. How can you be the best in the world at something and not even know what it is?
And that, right there, is the fallacy. That question. We conflate knowing the definition with knowing the function. Joe Siegel didn't need to know about chlorophyll or kiln drying processes.
He didn't need the textbook.
He needed to know the price action. He needed to understand how buyers panicked and how sellers got greedy. He understood the market dynamics of the lumber, not the biology of the lumber. He knew what mattered for survival in his world.
That's a great distinction. It's like knowing the chemical formula for ink doesn't help you write a better novel.
That is the perfect analogy. The author, the intellectual, knew the ink. He knew all the details. Joe Siegel knew the story the market was telling. And here's the real kicker.
What's that?
The author admits that he, the intellectual with all the facts, went broke, trading green lumber. He lost money.
He knew everything, and he failed.
While Joe Siegel knew, functionally, nothing about the product, and he made a fortune.
Because the facts the intellectual had were the wrong facts. They were what the source calls green paint. They were visible, they were easy to memorize, easy to talk about at a dinner party, but they were totally irrelevant to the actual risk and reward.
This is the huge distinction between what the source calls know-how and know-what. We live in a world, especially now, that just glorifies the credentials, the definitions, the trivia, the Wikipedia-level knowledge. But survival in any real-world domain depends on know-how.
The practical skill.
The instinct for the risk. Joe Siegel had the know-how. He had survived.
This reminds me of the Lindy effect, which we've touched on in some of our previous deep dives. Can you maybe unpack that a bit more in this specific context?
Sure. So the Lindy effect is a really powerful concept. It's the idea that for non-perishable things, so not people, but ideas, technologies, books, recipes, the longer something has been around, the longer it's likely to stick around.
Time is the ultimate filter.
Exactly. Time burns away what is fragile. It was just a fad. So know-how, like the instinct of how to trade a market or how to bake bread or how to build a stone wall, that stuff is Lindy. It survives for centuries, for millennia, because it works. It's been tested by reality.
Whereas know what can be very fragile.
Very fragile. Definitions change. Scientific theories get overturned. The intellectual's knowledge was fragile because it wasn't being tested by the profit and loss of the market every single day. It was just being tested by other intellectuals in a seminar room.
So if we apply this to how we evaluate people, if we try to stop looking for the green paint on people, what are we supposed to be looking for? What's the practical application here?
Well, the source has a very blunt rule, a hard and fast rule. Never, ever hire a well-dressed trader.
So if a guy shows up for an interview in a bespoke suit with a flashy Cartier watch, you just show him the door.
Immediately. Don't even talk to him. Because if he was actually good at his job, if he was actually making real money in the market, he wouldn't need the costume to signal that he's a successful trader. His P&L would do the talking. The suit is a compensation.
It's overcompensation.
The source introduces us to another amazing character to illustrate this. A guy named Jimmy Powers.
I love the description of Jimmy Powers. He's described as a minor Brooklyn street gangster.
Yes, that's his pedigree. Jimmy Powers was a college dropout. He had a thick Brooklyn accent. He was rough around the edges, to put it mildly, but he was an absolute killer in the markets. And the funny thing is, nobody in the corporate office could understand a word he was saying.
Literally. Like he was just mumbling.
He spoke in this sort of street code, this slang that was totally impenetrable to the guys in suits. He would walk into a high-level board meeting with all the executives and say things like, "We did this, bada boom, bada bing," and it was groovy.
Yes, groovy. In a board meeting in the 1980s.
Yes. And the executives in their pinstripe suits would just sit there, nodding sagely like they understood. They were completely befuddled. But they let him stay. They never fired him. Why?
Because Jimmy's department was printing money.
It was wildly profitable. His results bought him the freedom to be unintelligible. His success was the only language they needed to understand.
And the author draws a really profound conclusion from this.
He does. He realizes something. If you can understand someone too easily, if they speak in perfect, jargon-filled corporate sentences, if they use all the right buzzwords at all the right times, you should actually be suspicious.
That feels so counterintuitive. We're all taught from a young age that clear communication is the hallmark of a great leader, of intelligence.
And it can be, if the leader has something real to communicate. But in the corporate world, that kind of clear, polished rhetoric is often just a mask. It's a tool used by people who don't have the results to fall back on. If you can't show me the profit, you have to tell me a really good story.
You have to use the green paint of language.
You have to. Jimmy Powers didn't need the language because the P&L statement was his translator. It spoke for him.
This makes me think of every single consultant I've ever met. The slide decks are always beautiful. The vocabulary is flawless. Synergy, paradigm shift, leveraging core assets.
And the source would say that is all green lumber. It's trivia, it's decoration. It's designed to mesmerize you, to make you feel like you're in the presence of genius, so you don't ask the simple, brutal question, have you ever actually run a business like mine yourself?
Which brings us neatly to the next section, what the source calls the costume of competence. Because while maybe traders and entrepreneurs can get away with looking messy, there are certain jobs where looking the part is basically the whole gig.
Yes, this is the critical distinction between the entrepreneur and the CEO. The source argues that image matters less when you are dealing directly with reality, like a trader whose P&L is updated every second, or a startup founder trying to find product-market fit. But image matters more the deeper you go into a hierarchy.
So the corporate ladder is basically just a beauty pageant.
In many ways, yes. Or maybe an acting audition. Think about the archetypal CEO of a Fortune 500 company. They almost all look the same. They speak the same. They use the same metaphors, the same vocabulary learned at the same business schools. It's highly standardized.
It's a uniform.
It is. Their job, in large part, is to look like actors, playing the role of a CEO for the board, for the press, for Wall Street.
It's true. You rarely see a Fortune 500 CEO who looks like Jimmy Powers. They're all polished. They have the silver hair. They have the reassuring baritone.
And that's because their performance isn't just judged by raw market reality in the immediate sense. They are being evaluated by other people, by boards, by shareholders. It's the classic principal-agent problem. The CEO is an agent. He has to convince the principals, the shareholders, that he knows what he's doing. And the easiest, most efficient way to do that is to look and sound like he knows what he's doing.
The source brings up a political comparison here. Ronald Reagan.
Reagan is the perfect example. He was an actual actor. And you could argue he was one of the most successful presidents in modern history. Not in spite of that, but because of that. The job of president had become, in large part, about performance and image.
And the source also makes a really interesting and maybe slightly controversial point about Barack Obama, too.
Right. And again, this isn't a political judgment. The argument is that Obama's persona, the Ivy League diction, the calm professorial vibe, the measured cadence, was a masterfully constructed image build. It wasn't fake, but it was a performance designed to signal a certain kind of intellectual competence. It allowed people to project their own hopes and expectations onto him.
It's like the best actor is the one nobody realizes is acting.
Precisely. And this all comes back to that difference between the person who is rich and the person who looks rich. This is the millionaire next door concept in action.
This is one of my favorite anecdotes in the material.
It's so good. The author talks about a neighbor in his ancestral village in Lebanon. This guy led a very, very modest life. He ate the food he grew in his own garden. He wore simple clothes. He drank his own homemade pasties.
Which, knowing that region, was probably better than anything you could buy in a store.
I'm sure it was. But to an outsider, he looked like a peasant. He looked poor. And when he died, everyone was shocked to find out he left an estate of $100 million.
$100 million?
100 times what anyone would have possibly guessed. He had no need to signal his wealth, so he didn't.
And meanwhile, you have the guy at the country club who leases the Ferrari and wears the giant gold watch.
Exactly. The source mentions a rule they teach in private banking. You were specifically taught not to chase the guy with the Ferrari at the country club.
Why not? He's the one who looks like he has money to invest.
Because the person who feels the need to signal wealth that aggressively is often over-leveraged. They're fragile. They're acting rich. The person with real if-you money, the kind of money that's robust and secure, doesn't need to signal it to anyone. They might drive a 10-year-old Toyota.
It reminds me of that old line, money talks, but wealth whispers.
That's exactly. And to take it to an even darker place, the source uses the analogy of a thief.
Right.
A skilled, successful thief should not look like a thief. If someone fits the stereotype of a criminal, if they look like a thug from a movie, they're probably already in jail or not very good at their job. The truly successful ones, the ones who never get caught, probably look like your accountant.
So if we strip away the costume, we have to look at what's really underneath. And this doesn't just apply to business and wealth, but, as we're about to see, it applies to science and literature and even medicine. This next section on scientism versus science really blew my mind.
It's the bishop analogy that really just lands it perfectly.
Yes, let's talk about the bishop. This is such a vivid, powerful image.
Okay, so I want you to picture a bishop, a high-ranking bishop in, say, the Greek Orthodox Church. He's wearing these heavy, ornate, gold-threaded robes. He holds a gilded staff. He has a long, flowing beard. He walks with this immense, slow dignity. The whole thing is a performance.
A ritual.
It's a ritualistic show of power and history and gravitas. The holiness of the room depends on his slowness, his weight, his costume.
Right. He is the living embodiment of tradition.
Now imagine that same bishop putting on a pair of rollerblades.
Right.
And he starts zooming around the altar. Maybe he does a little spin, a little jump. What happens to the sense of holiness?
It completely evaporates. It's gone in an instant. It becomes a comedy sketch. He ceases to be a bishop. He becomes a guy in a fancy costume on wheels.
Exactly. The source argues that this is because his power is decorative. It's fragile. It
Mm.
relies completely on the ritual. If you introduce something dynamic and unpredictable like rollerblades or, say, reality, the authority just collapses.
And the comparison here is akin modern economists.
Ouch. But yes, that's the argument. The source draws a direct parallel between modern intellectuals, specifically in what he calls the soft sciences like economics or sociology, and the ancient priestly castes.
The Brahmins, the Druids, the scribes.
Yes, they all maintained power and status through complex rituals and mysteries and jargon that kept the outsiders out. It created an air of authority.
So an economics paper that is filled with impenetrable jargon and complex math that nobody can really apply to the real world, that's just a modern ritual. That's the bishop's robe.
The source calls it scientism. It's things that look scientific. They have the charts, the citations, the complex vocabulary, but they lack the vital rigor of being tested against reality. He talks about citation rings, where academics just reference each other's work to keep the game going without ever having to produce a result that works in the real world.
And the criticism in these fields is usually about the presentation.
Right. It's, you didn't use the correct format, or your literature review missed this obscure paper. It's rarely, your idea is wrong because it doesn't work.
Whereas in real science or in engineering, nobody cares about the format if the bridge falls down.
Exactly. If you build a bridge, gravity is your final peer reviewer. If you write an economics paper, your peers are the only reviewers. That is the fundamental difference. Real intellect shouldn't need to wrap itself in the costume of being intellectual.
And this bleeds into art and literature too. The source tells a great story about Georges Simenon, the famous Belgian writer.
Right. So early in his career, Simenon worked as an assistant to Colette, another literary giant, and she gave him a piece of advice that completely changed his life and his writing. She told him to cut the imperfect subjunctives, cut the zephyrs, and the rhododendrons.
Basically, stop using fancy writer words to try and sound literary.
Stop trying to look like a writer and just write. True literature, like Simenon's work or Graham Greene's, is stripped to its core. The atmosphere is conveyed because the words themselves get out of the way. If you're busy showing off your vocabulary, you're just blocking the reader from the actual story. Literature shouldn't look like literature.
I feel like this applies so much to the corporate world, too. I mean, how many times have we all seen a business plan that is just pages and pages of buzzwords and projections that are pure fantasy?
The source is absolutely brutal on the idea of the formal business plan. He calls them narratives designed to convince suckers.
Whew. But isn't planning important for a business?
Planning is vital. But the document, the glossy 50-page binder with the 5-year forecast, is usually fiction. Think about the biggest, most world-changing success stories. Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, Google. Did they start with a beautiful business plan presented to a venture capitalist?
No, they started with guys tinkering in garages or dorm rooms.
Exactly. They started with people who had skin in the game, who were obsessed with building a product. They grew organically, responding to reality day by day. The funding usually came after they had traction to help them expand. It wasn't the source of creation.
So the business plan is just the costume you wear to get money from people who don't have skin in the game themselves.
Precisely. It's the green paint all over again. It gives the illusion of predictability and control in a world that is inherently unpredictable.
This obsession with complexity, with making things look impressive and planned, it leads us to the legend of the Gordian knot. I love a good historical analogy.
This is the ultimate anti-intellectual story. It's perfect. So Alexander the Great arrives in Gordium in modern-day Turkey. And there's this ancient ox cart, and it's tied to a post with a knot that is so complex, so tangled, that nobody can figure out where it starts or ends. It's made of cornel bark, and it's hardened over centuries.
And the prophecy attached to it is massive.
Huge. The prophecy says that whoever can untie this knot will become the ruler of all of Asia. So for years, you have all these wise men and thinkers and philosophers staring at it, trying to trace the thread.
They're trying to solve the puzzle on the puzzle's terms.
Yes, they are respecting the complexity of the knot. They're probably writing treatises on knot theory. Then Alexander shows up. He looks at it, he wrestles with it for a minute, realizes it's a total waste of time, draws his sword, and just chops the knot in half.
Boom. Problem solved.
And he went on to conquer Asia. The lesson is brutally simple. Never pay for complexity when what you need is a result. We're so often tricked into thinking the complex solution is the better or more scientific one. But often, the simple sword stroke is what you actually need.
The source gives a medical example here too, which I found fascinating. For a long, long time, medicine was obsessed with these incredibly complex
Oh
interventions.
yeah. It took us a surprisingly long time as a civilization to accept that for a common headache, giving someone a simple aspirin and telling them to get some sleep is infinitely better than performing exploratory brain surgery.
Right, but the surgery looks more scientific.
Of course it does. It involves bright lights and sterile knives and anesthesia and a team of experts in masks. It's high drama. It's impressive. But it's often an unnecessary and dangerous intervention. We are biased toward what the source calls the interventionista approach, doing something complex because it feels like we are earning our keep.
And this interventionista mindset is where things get really controversial in the source material and also really interesting. This leads us to the section on the over-intellectualization of life.
It does. We have this deep-seated tendency to believe that humans function by solving complex math problems in our heads all the time, even if we don't realize it. The source brings up Richard Dawkins' view on how a baseball player catches a fly ball.
Right. The Dawkins view is that the player behaves as if he's solving a series of differential equations to predict the trajectory of the ball.
Yes, that's the rationalist top-down view. But the researcher Gerd Gigerenzer comes along and argues that this is complete nonsense. The player isn't doing calculus on the field. The player is using a very simple heuristic.
A rule of thumb.
A rule of thumb. It's called the gaze heuristic. All you do is you fix your eyes on the ball, you start running, and you adjust your speed so that the angle of your gaze on the ball remains constant.
That's it. Just keep the angle constant.
That's it. No math, no physics. Just a simple embodied rule of thumb, a shortcut that works. And the source argues that we, as humans, survive on these kinds of heuristics, not on complex conscious understanding. You don't need to understand the aerodynamics of the ball to catch it.
But here's the problem, right? You can't sell a simple heuristic. You can't charge a massive consulting fee for telling a CEO, just keep your eye on the ball.
Exactly. Complexity sells. People whose job it is to find solutions have absolutely no incentive to propose a simple one. If you're a high-priced consultant or an academic researcher or a government bureaucrat, you are rewarded for perception, not just results. A simple solution makes you look redundant.
And this brings us to the most pointed case study in the book, golden rice. Now, I want to be really clear here for our listeners. We are reporting on the source's argument regarding risk and systems, not taking a political stance ourselves on GMOs, but the source uses this as a prime example of the interventionista mindset versus the simple solution.
Right. And it's a powerful example. So let's frame the problem. Malnutrition and vitamin A deficiency in developing countries. It's a tragic, horrible, real problem. It causes blindness. It causes death, especially in children.
Okay, so the techie solution, the complex, scientific-looking intervention, is golden rice. You genetically modify rice, a staple food, to contain beta-carotene, which the body converts to vitamin A. It sounds like a miracle of science. It looks in the future.
It looks very scientific, it's high-tech, it's innovative, but the source critiques this on a few fundamental levels. First, the green lumber argument. He argues that at its core, malnutrition is largely a distribution and poverty problem. We already produce more than enough food to feed the world. We waste about a third of it.
So transportation is the issue. Spoilage is the issue.
It's a poverty problem, not a rice gene problem. The simple low-tech solution is fix the roads, improve storage, reduce waste, and get the existing diverse nutrient-rich food to the people who need it.
But that's boring. That's not sexy. It doesn't win you a Nobel Prize.
Exactly. The source asks a devastatingly simple question. Why not just give the kids rice and a vitamin pill separately? We don't genetically modify our coffee to contain milk, we just add milk.
That's a funny but very accurate analogy.
But the deeper critique is about risk categories. The source argues that transgenics moving genes between species that would never ever mix in nature, like putting a fish gene in a tomato, is skipping what he calls complexity classes. It's fundamentally different from traditional slow crossbreeding, which has been filtered by Lindy for millennia.
It introduces unknown systemic risks.
Exactly. And this is where we get into the idea of tail risk. The source argues that even if the benefit of something like golden rice is visible and measurable, the risk might be hidden and invisible, lurking in the tails of the probability distribution.
What kind of risks?
Systemic risks. Things like the long-term effect of increased pesticide use on the soil microbiome, or creating a vast monoculture that becomes fatally susceptible to a new pathogen, leading to catastrophic famine. These are small probability, but system-destroying risks. Ruin problems.
And his point is that the proponents of golden rice often use emotional manipulation to silence this kind of risk analysis.
Yes. He says that if you dare to question the risk of the technology, you are immediately shown pictures of starving children and accused of being anti-science and heartless. It's a tactic designed to shut down critical thinking. The scientific-looking solution is pushed because it looks like progress, while the simple, boring, low-tech solution, better logistics and distribution, is ignored.
It's the bishop on rollerblades again. We want the solution that looks like a technological savior, not the one that actually works but looks mundane.
And this applies to how we evaluate people, too. Which brings us to some very practical advice, some heuristics for our listeners to take away from all this.
Let's talk about the hiring heuristic. This is the BS detection tool.
The rule is simple and, again, totally counterintuitive. If you have two candidates with apparently equal skills for a job, you should hire the one with the least label-oriented education.
So if I have a candidate from Harvard and a candidate from, say, a decent state school, and they both seem equally capable on paper and in the interview, I should hire the state school grad.
Yes, you should. Think about the filter again. The person without the Harvard degree had to succeed, despite the lack of credentials. They didn't have the Vuitton bag of a diploma to open doors for them. They had to overcome more hurdles, more bias. Their competence is therefore likely more robust, more tested by reality.
The source compares these Ivy League degrees to luxury goods, right?
He calls a Harvard degree a Vuitton bag or a Cartier watch. It's a status symbol. And he makes a key distinction. In fields like math or physics, the school matters less because the results are totally verifiable. You can either solve the equation or you can't. Reality is the judge. But in what he calls low-quality or fluffy fields, and he specifically targets academic, finance, and a lot of social sciences here, the prestige of the school or the journal is everything, because the content itself is often just complicated storytelling. The brand is the product.
I love that distinction. If the field is hard, the credentials matter less. If the field is fluffy, the credentials are all that matters.
And this leads directly to what he calls the evaluation trap inside big companies. Large corporations, HR departments, they love standardized evaluation forms. Rate your employee on a scale of 1 to 10 for consistency.
And the source absolutely hates these.
He tells a story about literally tearing up an employee evaluation form in front of his boss.
That is a very bold power move.
It is. But his reasoning was completely sound. He was a trader. The evaluation form asked for the percentage of profitable days. Now, that sounds reasonable, right? You want a trader who makes money most days.
Of course. Consistency. You want a steady earner, not someone who's all over the place.
But in the world of risk and trading, that is a deadly trap. This touches on a really deep concept called ergodicity. But the simple version is this. You can be profitable 99% of the time by taking on small risks that have a tiny, tiny chance of a massive catastrophic blow-up.
Like selling earthquake insurance in California.
Perfect example. Or playing Russian roulette.
Explain the Russian roulette part.
In a game of Russian roulette with a six-shooter, you have a 5 in 6 chance of winning and getting paid.
Yeah.
If you play it once, you're highly likely to be profitable. But if you keep playing, you will eventually die. The average return of all players is high, but your individual return is eventually 0. A trader who makes a little bit of money every single day by betting against a stock market crash is consistent until the crash finally happens, and then he loses the entire bank. He blows up.
And the source's own strategy was the opposite.
Completely. He was a trader who often lost small amounts of money most days. He was bleeding pennies, but he was betting on the crash. So when the Black Swan event finally happened, he made a fortune.
So the standardized metric percentage of profitable days would have fired him, the guy who ultimately made millions, and given a huge bonus to the Russian roulette player, the guy who eventually blew up the firm.
Exactly, because the metric was designed by bureaucrats who don't understand tail risk. It was designed by people with no skin in the game. It measured the appearance of stability, not actual robust stability.
It's all coming back to that central theme, the appearance versus the reality. And this final heuristic might be my favorite because it hits me right in in my own laziness. The gym heuristic.
Real gyms shouldn't look like gyms.
I look at my local gym, and it's like a spaceship. There are rows and rows of elliptical machines with their own TV screens. There's purple mood lighting. There's a juice bar selling something called a vitality shot for $10.
And the source says, this is all a complete scam. It's the scientism of fitness. These fancy, complicated machines are designed to sell memberships, not to build real-world strength. They isolate muscles in these weird, unnatural ways. He argues they make you pear-shaped and weak because the skills you build on them don't transfer to lifting a suitcase or your child.
So what's the alternative? What does a real gym look like?
A concrete floor, some rusty iron, and a barbell, a metal bar with heavy weights. Or maybe just a heavy rock in a field.
The simplest possible thing in the room?
It's the Lindy effect again. Humans have been lifting heavy rocks and bars for 2.5 millennia. The barbell forces you to recruit your entire body, your core, your legs, your back, just to stabilize the weight. It's methy, it's hard, it's even a little dangerous if you don't pay attention, but it works.
And he says exercise shouldn't look like exercise.
Right? It shouldn't look smooth and easy and effortless. It shouldn't look like a montage in a Nike commercial. Real exercise should be about working the tails of the distribution. Maximum effort, struggle, sweat, maybe even a grunt. If you're sitting on a recumbent bike reading a magazine, you aren't really exercising. You're just engaging in fitness theater.
Fitness theater. I think I've been guilty of that more than a few times.
I think we all have. We buy the green lumber, we buy the image of fitness because it's so much easier and more pleasant than dealing with the heavy, unvarnished reality of the actual wood itself.
So let's bring this all home. We have gone all over the place here, from surgeons and traders to bishops and barbells. What is the single big takeaway for the person listening to this on their commute right now?
I think it means we need to constantly consciously check our own filters. When you are making a decision, hiring someone, choosing a doctor, investing your money, or even just picking a workout routine, you have to stop and ask yourself, am I being seduced by the costume, by the green paint?
Remember the surgeon, the guy with the silver hair and the perfect diplomas might be the best, sure, but he might also just be the best at looking like the best. The butcher is still there because he has to be the best.
And remember the green lumber trader. You don't need to know the botanical name of the tree to make money trading wood. You need to know the price mechanism. We have to get better at distinguishing useful, practical knowledge from useless trivia.
And remember Alexander the Great. When you are faced with a knot of complexity that seems impossible to untie, don't hire a consultant to write a 100-page report on the history of knots. Draw your sword. Find the simple, direct solution.
Simplicity often signals a true mastery of reality. Complexity often signals a desire to hide incompetence or to sell you something you don't need.
So here's my challenge to you, the listener, for this week. Look around your workplace or your community or just your own life. Where are you choosing the polished actor over the rough doer? Where are you buying a narrative just because it's packaged in a nice PowerPoint deck?
And maybe ask yourself a tougher question. Are you the bishop on rollerblades? Are you relying on your title, your jargon, your costume to get respect? Or do you have the skin in the game, the real results, to back it all up?
That's a tough question to end on, but I think that's why we're here. Next time you see a glossy business plan or a perfectly polished expert, just remember, it might all just be green paint. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Stay grounded.